Okay, you're recording.
Are you ready to go? Good. I'd
All
like
right.
to call the Waunakee Community School District Board of Education Special Meeting Reorganization and Budget Workshop to order. Randy, do we need to take a roll call of the board?
I think we have all board members here.
Okay. And do we have somebody that will approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
I think that was Dave and Joan.
And do we have time for any public comments right now, Randy?
I did not see any. Judy?
Okay. Well, then I will turn the budget workshop back over to you, Randy.
All right, awesome. I appreciate that. Going to share my screen, everybody. All right, can everybody see my presentation screen? Make sure I did that correctly.
Good.
All right, I see. I can see. All right, thank you. I appreciate everybody's attendance here this evening. This is a really important meeting that we have every year. I was thinking back, I think this is about the 11th year that we've done a workshop like this in the spring. With the intended purpose is to really present to the leadership of our school district, our administrative team, and as well as all of our teacher leaders. When we combine ourselves as a group, we're right around 75 to 80 people. And I think from our RSVPs for tonight, we were going to be getting close to that 70 participants. So I think that's really exciting. So thank you for spending some of your evening with us. We're going to try to move through this as judiciously as possible and to cover really the broad pieces of our budget. And then we have three different breakout pieces. Steve Summers, our business manager, and I had sat down and talked about things that either he or I felt were important for us to talk about. One of the things that particularly was looking for some feedback on, which will be a larger group discussion towards the second part of our meeting, is with regards to timing of compensation. I think that's a piece we can kind of predict where the conversation is going to go, but we certainly want to hear from staff with regards to some of your feelings with regards to that. And then we're going to do a few different breakout sessions, which is why we're all operating right now out of kind of the private offices out at Bethel Circle. And we'll pre-populate some breakout groups to have some discussions about board priorities, just so you have an understanding of some of the directions that the board is looking to go in the next year, some feedback with regards to those, and then also the budget requests that we have put forth and that are still up for really discussion as we go into the first draft of the budget in May, and then subsequent drafts going all the way up until the fall. As I had shared earlier, Steve Summers, this is his presentation that he put together and prepared for this evening. I received notification just about 10-15 minutes ago that he's not able to attend this evening. So please bear with me as I work my way through his slides and some of I think the intent of where he was going with the conversations this evening with regards to the data slides he has. So our first piece is what we want to talk about is what's happening with the state budget. So we are in a state budget year where every 2 years we have to go through this process where the budget starts, we start spending our budget on July 1st. But it is very much determinant on what's happening at the state level and the state budget that's put forth for 21-23. So we want to talk about some of the things that are in there, and then some of the directions and the parameters that we are putting in place district-wide as we kind of walk through that process with a lot of unknowns and really not very specific variables at this point in time. So we'll talk about some of the things that we have as our parameters going into 21-22. Talking a little bit about enrollment, class sizes, the budget assumptions, what resources we have in our budget requests. And then as I shared previously, looking at our feedback loops that we want to have some dialogue with all of you on. A little bit of background just with regards to budgeting as a school. When you take a look at dollars we receive at a school, the most important piece that we can have that gives us more money is actually the revenue cap. So everything is really tied to what happens with additional dollars that is put on what Steve has called here the revenue limit authority. I often look at that as kind of the tight bar that we can't go over. And underneath there are two really major piles of money. One of them is state general aids that we get from the state, and the other is local property taxes. And so just to kind of give you an idea of what happens underneath the revenue cap is if you receive more state aid, well then, as long as that cap stays the same, you just pay less in property taxes. So that's definitely been a tax relief strategy where more money comes in on state aids to schools. And really what its function is it just drops property taxes, but it doesn't increase that revenue cap ceiling. So those are the pieces that we just have to kind of be watchful of as we walk through here. So the very first piece that Steve has outlined here is that in the initial state budget that's been proposed, it's looking at a $200 and a $204 pupil increase. Those are dollars that would certainly then increase the revenue limit and give us more flexibility within our system to be able to generate more revenue. These are a lot of assumptions. Some of these apply to us. Low revenue ceilings are factors that impact some different school districts. You can see the spending of $10,250 and $10,500. Those are for districts that don't spend at that level, and some abilities then to spend up to that if they are a lower spending district. And then there's also some pieces with regards to referenda that they have within the state budget recommendations right now. General aids right now, they're looking at the $22.1 million of general aids in the first year, $391 million in the second year. Again, any dollars that they put into general aids then has a reciprocal effect of balancing out what we pay in local property taxes. One to be watching very carefully as we move forward is what's going to happen with regards to special education aid, because anything that they increase with special ed aid has an immediate effect on our ability to have more revenue as a school district. So right now, I believe we're funded at about 28% of our special education programs, and staff, qualifying staff are reimbursed at a 27% margin. Anything else above that, we have to pick up in Fund 10 or otherwise our general fund. If they increase what our aid is with regards to special education, that is a piece that we will then actualize, that we don't have to put as many Fund 10 dollars towards it. So that's a piece that we will absolutely be watching as the state budget goes forward. The other piece to kind of be watchful of here that is how do we count students? We count students in the school district in September and January, the third Friday in September, the second Friday in January. And those are on a 3-year rolling average. So one of the things that's occurred this year is that we had actually a reduction in students as we went through all the issues around COVID. That has put us into, for the next few years, having an impact of a declining enrollment district as a result of it. So that'll be a piece that will be with us for 3 years as those students kind of roll off our rolls. And even if they return next year, which I anticipate many of them doing, it still is a piece that stays part of the formula for that 3-year time period. There's also a piece within the state budget with regards to 4-year-old kindergarten and how you can count those depending on how your program is structured, being a half day or a full day. I actually kind of jumped ahead to this one, but this is the special education categorical aid. As I said, it's currently at 28.2%. The proposal in the state budget is for 45 to 50% of an increase. That would be significant for us to move forward with. As you will see in our budget assumptions, we take more of a middle of the road approach to be conservative on that number, because we certainly feel like there will be movement in that area, but I think it would be pretty aggressive for the state to go all the way to 45 or 50%, even though that would be ideal. And then for high cost special education aid, which falls into very specific criteria and circumstances, adjusting some of that aid upward as well. There's also some pieces that are being put forth with regards to mental health and school climate. So there's some additional dollars in the state budget being proposed to help assist with mental health services on different grant dollars and different categorical aid pieces that would help with our school mental health needs. I think that's a piece that there's been a great deal of advocacy for across the state, particularly given the last few years that we've been in, and there's some dollars being allocated towards that. Looking at the bottom piece, I'm not exactly sure where Steve was going there. I believe this is a piece looking at weighted payments for different districts and students when you have different levels of poverty across the districts. And this is just a piece that has been proposed with regards to how we can account for that in the school funding formula. So again, these are proposals that are part of the state budget. They have not been adopted. I don't anticipate the state budget being completed till sometime this summer, but they're definitely the pieces that are being pushed forward, moved in front of committee, and discussion is happening in Madison around them. All right, so where are we at with our budget process? So the pieces that we spent some time taking a look at was, what do we feel is going to be realistic with regards to our revenue cap? And what we talked about was, there was a recommendation in the state budget, or the initial proposal was $200 and $210, I believe. We chose a middle of the road approach of $150 per student. When we take a look at the special education aid, I believe that was proposed at 45 to 50%. Like I shared earlier, I don't think that's a realistic item for us to be able to reach all in 1 year. But if we could reach the 35% mark, I think that is a reasonable number for the state to move to, and would definitely have a positive impact on us. And then when we take a look at our student enrollment, we're projecting 4,316 students. So these are some of the parameters that we've walked through as we put together the first draft of the budget. Now, the student enrollment projections are a really important piece. We've been a growing district for many, many years. You go back probably 25 years, you can see the growth trend that's occurred. This is actually the first year in recent memory that we had a decline in enrollment. So you can see we had a change of 70 students, a 1.6% decrease. Certainly not a catastrophic or a trend that I see continuing, but definitely a piece when you look at a 3-year rolling average, that is going to be a piece that we're going to feel as we move into not only this next year, but the subsequent year following that. When you start to look at where our projections go, the one piece that we have to be most mindful of is specifically looking at the size of the classes that we're graduating. I mean, this year's senior class is 353 students, and our kindergarten 4K class is 268. So you start to see the differential as far as what's happening as far as younger kids coming in and the graduating classes that we are bringing forth. So when you look in 21, 22, it shows that we are projecting on a conservative basis about 10 new students. So the trend is going in the right direction, but that's accounting for that we have to make up for the difference between the large graduating class that is leaving us and the new students joining us at the very beginning of our education spectrum. So that means we have to make up that delta first, and then an additional 10 kids on top of that. So we are continuing to have growth, but the growth that we're seeing has to make up for the differential in the size of those classes. Now, the piece that we'll have to watch moving forward is, are we going to continue to see growth in these classes as they move forward? Our trend line has been that we generally accumulate students all the way through elementary school, and by the time they get to 5th, 6th, 7th grade, that class has really hit kind of a point where they're relatively close or within a few percentage points of what their size will be at when they graduate from high school. So we'll see if that trend continues, and that'll be a piece that we will be studying as we move forward. But the head count and the student count is a really important factor for us to be looking at as we look at dollars moving forward. It's definitely having an impact on our budgeting for this next year. So when we take a look at our sections, what we have tried to do this year, and this was through some of the work and support of our budget committee, was to really try to focus on post-COVID, keeping our class sizes lower. So when you take a look at our and our averages on the right-hand side or in that third column for our elementary K through 6. Those ratios are probably the lowest that we have seen in many, many years in our district. Traditionally, over the last number of years, as we've continued to grow, we've moved our class sizes to really almost the maximum level that we have allowable by policy. And in some areas, we've had to go over by a student or two. This year, we'll definitely be starting off very much in, and particularly at the K-6 level, at more of an optimal level. You'll also see as we move into 7th and 8th grade that we are moving a few sections. We're adding 2 sections to our 7th and 8th grade because we have those larger classes, again, moving through for next school year. And then our 9 through 12, when we take a look at our total impact, our total FTE impact for 7-12, I think Steve has listed here as 2.69 positions. So you can see that we definitely are not adding a lot of staff this year. We're maintaining staff, which is allowing us with some of the lower class numbers to keep class sizes lower. So we're able through just maintaining the staff that we've added over time. I think we're having a positive impact instructionally on the class sizes that you'll generally see across the district. So here's the big picture, taking into account those assumptions. So when I'm just going to scroll back for a second. When you take into account these 3 items, the A, B, and C, your student count, your special ed aid that we're projecting, and the $150 a student, and you roll that through into really an assumption, it really gives us about $1 million in additional revenue for next year. So that's how it breaks out. What we have gone through is we've generally put most of our dollars, 80+% of our budget is really tied up in staff and people. We're very much a people business. So you can see the majority of that $1 million right now is moving towards salary increases. So we have 3.06%. We have $0 for the health and dental. It's because we're still within the agreement we have with SSM Dean and with our, as we review our dental program, we don't have an increase there. We have a few pieces that we are moving forward with regards to, trying to think what Steve has there with regards to the contingency fund. We added a position in contingency this year that we needed to bring back into the expenditure line. There's nothing with regards to the dean. And then we just projected forward transportation, utilities, open enrollment. We really don't have that number yet. Supplies, liability insurance, all of those things that are just the roll forwards and the anticipated inflationary amounts that will go along with some of the operational sides of our house, the transportation, utilities, supplies, all of those type of things. And you can see when we pull all of those together, we generally come out with a balanced budget here. So for our first draft of the budget, just doing our salary increase of just over 3%, and then the roll forwards of all of our operational expenses really addresses what we have projected within our budget. Now we feel that the parameters that we're using are conservative. Anything that is better than what we've projected in the state budget will reflect in a positive manner within our budget picture. But I think when you start to look at what's occurred with regards to the dollars that are available statewide, and then just the impact of that 3-year rolling average of enrollment, there's definitely a piece where we feel the impact of that. So this is the big picture. This is going to be a piece that you will see move forward into the first draft of the budget. And then as we learn more and as more things get set at the state level, then these pieces become solidified, they become updated. And as we go into November, that's when our last draft of the budget goes in front of the board and we approve it at our annual meeting and at the end and going into setting our levy. All right, so next year in the next few years, we have some additional funds. And this is a part of what we need to have some conversations with. And we're looking for some feedback, obviously, from our group this evening, but it's also a piece that we will be talking about with our budget committee and the full board moving forward. This past November, we have passed an operational referendum for $2.1 million. So that was for 5 years. So we have those dollars available to us on an annual basis up through 2024-25. We also receive different levels of federal funding. So ESSER 1, that's the federal funding level 1, I think we got 60-some thousand dollars. It was pretty small. The second level of ESSER is tied to is 248,000. And then the third piece of ESSER, which will be more significant funding, and coupling it with ESSER 2, there's going to be a formula that will be included as far as how many hours you were actually open this school year, and some formulaic pieces that we will not know the true impact of until we go into the fall. As we take a look at it, though, I think it's fair to say we'll probably have the 2.1 million, which is our referendum piece. And then I'm anticipating that the combination of the ESSER 2 and 3, if I just throw out a ballpark number of $700,000-800,000, that's at least something for discussion sakes. But those will be some pieces that we anticipate we'll have more specifics on, particularly as we get into the later summer, and they know exactly how they're going to distribute those funds to districts. This is a piece that we've been very much involved with because the initial allocation per the ESSER 2 would have given us well over $1 million. I think it was 1.7 million. But when they started to then allocate it out based on how many hours you were open, as far as if you were remote or in person, that obviously changed the dynamic, particularly when you look at Dane County schools, which had a health order that prevented you from really making any of the moves that maybe some other districts around the state did. Now, whether that's the right decision or not, that's a piece that's being debated right now, and that's a piece that's definitely impacting us as a district when we look at the federal money coming forward and how it will be distributed. But just for discussion's sakes, I think if you look at it as $700,000-800,000, at least from a talking perspective, it'll give you an idea of what we have. And then on top of that, we have the 2.1 million each year through 24-25. All right, the budget request process. Let me just take a moment and explain to you what this is. So the list that's on this page and the following page is really a compilation of a visionary piece I asked our administrative team to do, I believe it was a year or two ago. And what I asked each department to do and each building to do and level was think forward as far as your short-term and your visionary needs out 5 years. So these are the items that were populated at that point. We also reviewed that this school year. And so you can see some of them. You can see the year that they were submitted. I think 2021 was kind of the visionary piece. Anything that was 21, 22 were some items that came forward this year as new needs evolved. You're not seeing any level of a prioritization to this at this point. I think these are all pieces that definitely have merit at every single level. As I've sat and discussed this, particularly with the leadership at our central office area, we do have pieces that fall more specifically to kind of the 1 and 2 year timeframes, and then definitely items that are more out to the 5 year timelines. And particularly, I think that's been in the student services area. I know Chris and Kurt have a number of requests on here, and it was very distinct as far as how they laid those things out over time. So this was really built off of a visionary piece. Where do you think we need to be going as a district? And what are the type of services that we need to be providing and support we need as we grow as a district? So that's both of these sheets. Now, that's a lot to be able to seek your input on. It's also a lot when we start to look at kind of where our priorities are for year 1. So this is a sheet that I put together. This is not one that's been fully vetted by our entire administrative team. It's been one that I take a look at where I, through conversations with members of the school board on our priorities, and then also looking at where I think some of our priorities need to be post-COVID, and also some things looking at what dollars we have available, trying not to create too large of a burden with one-time dollars that incur programs that have returning costs on a yearly basis. So Any position that you hire from, and you put a person in there, the cost of that continues moving forward. As opposed to purchasing, I think like musical instruments, I think we have $80,000 in there. That's a one-time purchase. I can spend that at one point in time. I can address those immediate needs, but I don't need to spend 80,000 the next year. Now I realize from the music department's perspective, there are ongoing costs that we have. That's kind of a separate discussion, but just as an illustrative point, some of the equipment pieces, services that are really shorter in duration have a one-time cost. Anytime we hire a position, it has an ongoing cost. So we have to not only, if we approve those, where we're going to use either referendum funds or any of our ESSER money, we then have to figure out how we are going to, over the next 4 to 5 years, then incorporate those into our budget as we move forward. So that's really where this list came from. It was kind of with a view towards priorities we've discussed with the school board, pieces that I've looked at as I went through this, particularly with Kurt Ely, Chris Mann, Tim Schell, and Amy Johnson, and trying to look at just what moves us forward from a district within a dollar amount that I feel fits within something that we can manage moving forward. So I'm just going to go through this real quickly so you can kind of get a sense of where my head was. And certainly all of these items, when we get to budget requests, are up for discussion as well. And if there's things that people are advocating for that need to be moved forward, that's part of the purpose for the meeting tonight. The district branding process, that's a priority of the board moving forward. That one I believe we can cover through any of our reallocation. The school board and I have a joint budget. We have right now carryover funds from the last 2 years of close to $30,000. So that will be no additional funds. That's just a reallocation of dollars that we already have in place. Interpreter and translation. Angie Ramos has been doing a phenomenal job for us this year. We have spent upwards of $40,000 on these services this year. It's a need that continues to grow every year, and we feel it's one that we need to bring in-house versus contracting it out. School psychologist and 504 coordinator, those were two separate requests. I actually, through a conversation with Kurt and Chris, decided I was going to combine those because coordination of I believe we have well over 100 504 plans. They have somebody who can work specifically on coordinating those. And then also with the school psych background could also provide some assistance with our social emotional needs as well. The reading interventionist, I think this was a piece that I know has been a conversation with regards to parents giving us feedback as far as we move forward post-COVID of how do we continue to support kids, particularly as they're coming off the last year and a half. So I've included really the interventionist type programs that were part of our budget request. So reading interventionist at Heritage, 1.5 K6 math interventionist. There was a reading support position. I believe that was an interventionist reading teacher. 0.5 FTEs there to help between middle school and high school. Taking a look at the area of a counseling office at the high school. High school testing and online program support is taking up quite a growing amount of time there. So trying to move those away into a specific position who could manage those should free up some time for our counselors to work more specifically with our students. Elementary does not have a elementary technology integration specialist. All of our other levels and buildings do. So this is a piece that I think is important, particularly as we move forward with more technology in our schools. The music equipment was a request as far as an initial outlay to help move some of their, I think this was like some of the basses, the larger equipment like the tubas that we own. And certainly that there were some other budget requests tied to music, but this is one that I put on here for illustrative purposes as a one-time expense. And then a piece that will be going in front of the board in May, at least for an initial discussion, is how do we support kids who really have found a home with some of the remote learning, and how do we support that piece moving forward? I don't have a cost determinant of that at this point, but it's a piece that we will be moving forward with. And I think that some of the dollars make sense as far as seed money to get that started. When you look at generally all of these, except for the remote learning piece there, you're between $430,000 and $500,000. That gives you an idea of what just those level of allocations would come to. All right, so I've spoken here for enough. So what I would like to do is really open this piece up for conversation. And I think what Steve's intent was here was really to have a large group discussion. So I would say that you can, as I pose the question, I guess I'm open to really how we want to seek your feedback here. If there's some folks who want to speak to it or drop it in the chat, any way is fine. But the first piece is for the last number of years, we have probably the last 10 years, we haven't really dealt with pay until the fall. The last few years, it's pushed all the way into December, and this year it was pushed beyond that. Part of the reason was looking at how we could find the greatest amount of dollars that we could assign to salaries, and knowing that moving into after the final budget was set in November. We received quite a bit of feedback on really wanting to move that piece forward. And what I really wanted to get your feedback on is, what are your thoughts as far as moving this piece earlier, so that as you come into the fiscal year, as you return to school in the fall, that you already have known really where your dollars are per your contract. So I guess that the piece that falls into here is we have to be probably a little bit more conservative when you don't know exactly what the state budget looks like, but wanting to really kind of get some feedback on moving forward with pay increases really more this summer, so that you come into the school year knowing exactly where you start at. And then secondarily, opposed to moving it kind of in the traditional way we've done it for the last decade. So I'm going to stop talking for a second and kind of open it up to anybody from the group who would like to share a perspective on that.
Randy, I have a quick clarifying question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Is there a gap between the amount of time, or what is the gap, I should say, between the amount of time between our fiscal year starting and when we actually get the aid from the state? Because I know some districts have to take out loans to bridge that gap until the state aid money finally comes through. How do we navigate that here in Waunakee?
Right. Now, that's a great question. I believe right now what Jeff's talking about is that we have to do short-term borrowing on an annual basis right now, because we don't have enough funds within our fund balance just to continue to meet all of our payment obligations based on the timing of when you receive money from the state of Wisconsin. And most districts, unless, I mean, I worked in a small district before I came here. Well, we had a 40% fund balance. So 40% of your budget was available to on an annual basis. In Waunakee, we're much more typical. We're below 15% right now. So we do have to borrow on a short-term basis every year. So I don't see that this decision really impacts that, Jeff, but we do short-term cash flow borrow every year just to meet those obligatory needs. But I don't think that needs to really be part. That's a great piece to bring up so that people are aware we do that. But I think where we're at with regards to this conversation, that's really not a factor I think we need to really worry about. I see that somebody's added in there. Thanks, Brian. Brian's giving me feedback. Any feedback on the pay piece? I'm really interested to see. I mean, and you can just stop sharing for a second. I mean, you can do it by a thumbs up if that's something, or if you want to bring out how many feel that it would be really important as we go into the next school year to really have pay determined before we get to the fall? Is that an important piece for you? I guess if you wanted to see your thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down, how important is that? See a lot of ones on the side. Others, I have some that are up.
Randy, if I could, I was under the impression we were going to be in breakout rooms. Is that not?
For this one, we
Okay.
decided we're going to
Okay.
one. Yeah, Steve and I felt this one was a large enough one that we felt we could just get some conversation going. And
Perfect.
we'll break out into the other ones. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I would then just share that now this conversation has kind of been on the table for a couple of years now. And when the WTA did a survey of all staff, I think it was 2 years ago now, this was nearly a top priority in that survey data. So this room certainly is important, but knowing that nearly everyone said that they would prefer to know before signing a contract what that contract meant for pay.
Yep,
So
and I think you represent that well, Gene. I think that's been a conversation as we've gone through negotiations every year. This has been a request. It's also a piece, I'll be very honest, it's an interest of ours administratively, because when we do back pay, particularly this last year when we bridged the calendar year, I mean, it's insane on our payroll folks.
Yeah.
And so I know from Brian Grabarski's perspective, this is a high priority for us to be thinking about. So, I mean, one of the things that there's pros and cons to it. The pro obviously is that you're able to kind of get those pieces moving forward. And we can get pay in the hands of teachers right at the very beginning of the year, actually all of our staff, not just our teaching staff. The con of it is we do have to figure out a number that we know is going to be appropriate. Now, we've also had conversations with regards to if something does change within the budget cycle, there's nothing that prevents the district from going back and reconsidering things. So that's a piece that we've discussed as well. And that's a piece that we definitely have thought about as far as how we would manage that. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, I appreciate you bringing that up, Gina, because I think that's accurate. Molly, I see your hand.
I think so many of us here have been in Waunakee for so long that doesn't matter as much. And younger teachers, like that, I think is more important to teachers that might not be in this space right now.
Right.
Just that perspective.
That's fair. And I know from the HR perspective, it's a high priority to see if there's a way that we could move it sooner. So I know, Brian, you're on here. Is there anything that you would add from your lens as in the HR office?
Well, thanks, Randy, and I'll slide over a little bit and crowd Judy. What I would say is the survey that was referenced was in 2019, and that was again across the teaching staff group only. It also is feedback that my office has received from staff, and I guess I would reiterate that the Waunakee Teachers Association that does represent the teachers group in negotiations has brought that forward every year that I've been a participant. So 2 is the director, once is the observer. And so that is something that has been spoken to, I believe, and presented as an interest of the group in several different avenues.
Yep, great. Thanks, Brian. I think Walter, I think I heard you had your hand up.
I just would be interested in information. I know that we've been waiting in part to increase teacher salaries. Out of the years that we've been doing this, how many of those years would you say that the delay has resulted in a larger salary for teachers?
I think that's, I would say in the past years, it's absolutely been a piece that has been a positive impact to have waited. I think as Steve, Brian, and I have talked about it, particularly given kind of where we're sitting right now with regards to kind of forecasting where we're at with kind of the state budget and where things are trending. We're probably a little bit better able to predict kind of generally where we're landing. I think in the past it was a little bit, we were still trying to figure out where those trend lines were. I think we feel like, given that generally school has and school funding has received quite a bit of support around the state, and that has been heard by the legislators. I think that I'm not worried about us getting a zero on the revenue cap, which was definitely some things that we were bouncing around a number of years ago. So looking at just generally where we've taken a very conservative approach to our initial budget projections, I think what we have right now outlined, we all feel is relatively safe to move forward with. We also have a few safety nets here, just with some of the other dollars that are available. So if there's a time to try it and see how we can move it forward, this might be a time that at least gives us an opportunity to look at it. That help, Walter?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was our real initial intent of why we did it, was there was so much volatility that it was with really what was happening with available dollars for schools, we felt our best picture was always going to come in the fall.
Randy Mark has his hand raised.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mark.
Would there be any reason we couldn't survey the entire staff, both the WTA and our non-teaching staff, within the next couple of weeks to get a stronger feel for how the 604 employees feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a piece that could definitely occur as we move forward in the planning piece. Brian, do you have any feedback on that?
I guess the one piece of feedback that I would offer is that something that is absolutely linked to the hourly staff transition to true time is making sure that we have the initial correct wage entered. And this is a fundamental difference in that within the electronic timekeeping system, staff will see what they are currently making, and they will see exactly on their anniversary date what their new wage changes to. Delaying that for a later hire essentially means that that transition to that system is not possible. And so this is, I would say my answer to that question is that there are a number of employee groups. The only one that currently has been provided that feedback opportunity is the Teachers Association. However, I have not ever received any feedback from any employees that they prefer delayed compensation increases. And so it's, I guess, two parts to the conversation. One is the relationship to true time, and one is delayed compensation increases are not in anyone's favor, as that money does not draw interest before it's given or provided.
I think we have some time that we can kind of take the temperature and kind of where we're at. I agree. I mean, I think Gina articulated it through some of the surveys that they've done with regards to the interest in moving this forward. And I think Brian's accurate in respect to generally what we hear from staff as we have gone out, and I know our board has done some of their listening sessions as far as trying to move that forward. So that's definitely a piece that I think is going to be on our radar as we move into the budget cycle and trying to determine the timing of when we move forward with that. So I think part of we wanted to bring this forward because it has been such a large discussion over the last number of years. See what your initial thoughts were on it. If there's anybody else who has others, we're welcome to hear them. But it's also a piece that will continue this discussion as we move forward. But I think we all have a general interest, if possible, when we can provide what we feel are fair increases to staff, to be able to move them as soon to when you start your contract as possible. And Andrew, I see your question in there. That's a big question. And I think it's with regards to just trying to explain kind of all the history with regards to the pay increases. One of the things I know that Brian is working through as he's looking at different compensation models is certainly looking at where we are within our trend lines, looking at how we compare at different levels of our staff within years of experience, and particularly in comparison to other districts with similarly situated and experienced staff. So that's definitely a piece that we're looking at. As far as some of the pay freezes, we really haven't had pay freezes. We've had different nuances within our system that haven't been able to be as fully funded as I know many people would like them to be. But we're definitely, it's on our radar to see kind of how past experiences and past decisions have impacted staff that currently reside in our system, and then how do we positively represent them and move them forward in subsequent years. Any other comments or questions on this item? And as with all of our topics tonight, we're not going to be able to spend a whole lot of time on any of them in super deep detail. If there's thoughts that you have after we are done with our workshop tonight, or things that spark as you're thinking about it and reflecting on it, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll take those comments, move them forward, and also consider them and answer your questions that you may have. All right. Get back to where I was. All right. The next item here, and what we're going to do is we are going to be now breaking up into small groups in just a minute, Rebecca. So the next piece, and just to kind of to tee it off, we are going to move into 7 different breakout groups. So what we have is a school board member and an administrator that will be part of each one of the breakouts. The first one is really a conversation about our school district board goals for next year and priorities. You'll see these are broken up really into 2 different pieces. One is the general priorities that we have, 1 through, I don't know why this is showing up. There's actually, when you get into your breakout room, you're going to see that there's a revised version of this PowerPoint. I must have grabbed the wrong one here because it did get revised today. There's actually a number 7 that goes down here that talks about some of the kind of the equity work that the board wanted to make sure was articulated here. And then there was an item with regards to trying to make sure that we were following up on things that we learned during COVID that we may need to continue, or things that we learned that we need to stop. So I apologize that whatever PowerPoint one I grabbed here is not the most current one. There is an update to this. But generally, there's a 7-point initial priorities, and then there's other budget priorities that the board and the budget committee discussed. There is overlap between them. They talk about everything from compensation to really supporting kids as we come out of COVID. So when we're going to break out into our breakout sessions, really what we're looking at is what questions do you have with regards to the goals and priorities? And then also, when we start to look at particularly our funds, the referendum and the federal dollars, what are some things that you see as priorities that we should be putting our dollars to? Because you can see from just the state's budget and us taking a conservative look at it, we generally don't have additional funds set aside to move forward with interventionists or other positions. But I feel that the conversation is needing to do some of those things to move our programs forward, particularly in the year that we're coming off of. So as we move into your breakout rooms, I would welcome the conversations around what we have occurring with, or what your thoughts are on the priorities. And I believe our administrators in each of the breakout rooms have the most current goals document. So I apologize that I have the wrong PowerPoint brought up here. So Rebecca, if you want to move us to our breakout rooms, that would be great.
Okay, cross your fingers, everyone.
Alright.
How do I move me in here? How do I put myself into this? Thank
Go to the one you wanted to join.
you.
First question, and then if you guys want to talk, I'm going to type while you guys are talking. So let's see here.
I just want to add, everyone, this breakout session is going to be part of the recording. So let's make it wonderful.
No pressure, Rebecca.
Can I be moved to a different breakout room?
And in this boardroom is John Kramer and Dave Betcher, I think, had to take a quick phone call, but he'll be right there.
Awesome. Okay, question number 1. What questions do you have regarding the school board goals and priorities? Anyone want to start for us here?
I'm new, but I will gladly at least break the ice. I did like that the priorities kind of had a broad stroke to them. They talked about facilities, they talked about some of our needs that are both around academics, but also around SEL. And also just kind of infusing the need to continue to move our district forward around its equity work. I didn't see it, maybe I missed it, but I did see nothing really that mentioned like sustaining current programming. I was a little bit curious about how we continue to do things like maintain our music programs or maintain our extracurricular activities or clubs or things like that if we're not purposely making sure that we're planning for that stuff as those costs rise as well. But overall, I think the goals themselves seem to cover a lot of the really key things, especially the long-range planning stuff around our buildings and how we continue to move forward with the district that needs some facilities updated, even though maybe our growth is starting to level off a little bit.
Thank you, Jeff.
I would like to see a little bit more clarification of 2A, the audit of district communication and engagement process. What activities all fall under that? I mean, I can assume that some of it is the social media stuff that gets done, emails to home, other parent content, but there's a lot that goes into that. So I'm curious to see what all is being considered for that part of it.
Thank you. That's great. Actually, we are presenting at the May 10th board meeting regarding that. So. Thank you very much.
I think as part of number 5, where the district equity efforts, I'm just wondering if there's more to it than just making an equity statement. Are they also gonna, look into some curriculum or something for teachers to follow to teach some of the equity issues that we have? Because teachers are very worried about trying to go off on their own and then getting in trouble for that.
I was kind of along the same lines a little bit on that. And it's maybe not, here's an equity curriculum, more or less analyzing our current curriculum to ensure it's equitable for our students and staff, representations of specific cultures, races, other subgroups or populations, and then identifying the gaps that align to that so that we can supplement in where is needed or change or adopt something new that would be representation of a more equitable and inclusive universal curriculum. there may be action. I'm also thinking of like action steps or priorities that we also need to develop around equity for our own learning as staff members. And how we then act as culture responsive educators.
Yeah, I would build on what you said there, Katie. Halfway through, the phrase professional development popped into my head, and I was like, that seems to be absent of this budget priorities as well. And I think if you're going to move equity forward, it's how do you teach differently? How do we assess learning differently? How do we, create more student voice and choice in how we do things? And that impacts programming, and that's going to take a lot of professional development, and that's not noticeably present in this plan.
And also, I feel like looking at our current students and seeing if we're meeting their needs. We have a lot of Spanish speaking students that have no one translating for them. And they're just using an iPad to translate things, which I don't know, when we talk about equity and we see kids in our own classroom struggling, that's really difficult.
I also think of number one, the return to school efforts. There's talk about prioritizing interventions to support students' academic achievement and social emotional health. Two things pop into mind. Well, okay, maybe one. That's great to prioritize students, but we also need to prioritize staff. Like staff have gone through many changes this year. And we're asking them even to reflect at the end of this year of how next year is going to look different and how we function. Like that social emotional, all of us are going through trauma. And so the self-care and the social emotional mental health of our staff is important because we know that it's valuable for them to be at a place that they can teach our kids and engage with our kids to provide them these interventions, to provide them with the social emotional support that they need. And they're the number one barrier between having our students succeed. So we need to invest in that too.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. We have about 4 minutes. I will read the second question. What feedback do you have regarding the use of one-time funds to address school board goals, priorities, referendum funds, and federal funds? So that includes all of that.
Okay, I waited long enough. I would hope that we would be very wise with how we do things that are non-recurring. So I would suggest that we avoid investing this in things that are like staff. We do that more with money that we know we're going to have. And when we have a golden opportunity maybe to upgrade some things in our buildings that maybe need to be done. If there's programs we've been neglecting that need a little bit of boosting in equipment or things like that, now's the time to buy maybe the lunch tables that you wish you needed, or maybe you want to convert your classroom to a more student-centered environment. You buy some tables and get rid of some of the other desks if that's what your building needs. But find some of these one-time purchases that don't need to be recurring that can help you get to meeting your district goals, but don't require an ongoing expense. And I don't know what all those would be. They would definitely be different from a K-4 building to a 5-6 building, all the way to a high school and in between. So, but I think if we can find some things to prioritize there, I'd like to see that money being spent that way, so we don't pin ourselves against the wall in case the budget goes sideways 2, 3, 4 years down the road.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I'd say it's going to require some creativity because a lot of times we get locked into what we do and how we do it, and we don't necessarily always think outside the box of how could we do this even better, and what might enable us to do that from a material standpoint or from that kind of thing. So yeah, that is the hard part, because I think a lot of times I think about, and I think a lot of people think about the personnel standpoint of it, which obviously, as was pointed out, is a big part of the budget, but is an ongoing expense. It's a recurring expense, and it's just, you can't use one-time money for that. So,
but we could use it to invest in our personnel, not in more personnel, but really the professional development that we need to do. Like, there's a lot of things out there that we don't do because it's crazy expensive. But if you got a little bit of money for a few years, maybe now's the time to try to train your staff in something really meaningful that everybody gets on board with, and it becomes a focal point for the entire district.
Yeah, or funding for those extra days for professional development, because we're always struggling to find the time to get those in there. And if you can pay a competitive compensation for the time to go through and do that outside of the contracted school year, then maybe that's a good idea to use that as well.
Thank you, Todd and Jeff. All right, looks like we have about 60 seconds. Does anybody have any final thoughts?
I have one real quick, and this is just, maybe it's semantics, but in looking at one, to go back to the priorities,
Okay.
The way that they are ordered, A and B and C, I think all of those really need to be considered equally. I do not feel personally that any one of those needs to be prioritized over the other, if you catch my meaning. The SEL component of it, especially with everything that everybody's gone through, is just as important as the academic measuring sticks that we're going to be trotting out there to take a look at to see where kids are as far as their academic progress. I mean, everybody's learning is a journey. It all happens differently. Everybody's going to end up in a different ending point in their lives. And I just don't want to see us get too dialed into, the academic end of it when there's a lot of other important work to do.
Thank you. $20 seconds. Any final thoughts?
I agree with Todd.
I agree. We just need to be careful with, we've had some pushback from parents on the mindfulness thing, saying that it doesn't follow their religion. So we just need to be careful that that equity piece also is attached to that SEL piece and we don't go crazy about it.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. What we are going to do now is I'm going to jump us back to when you looked at earlier on in this presentation, we talked about the budget requests. So this is really going to be a conversation that's going to be with regards to what are your thoughts on some of the budget requests, some of the priorities. You can be pulling things from the larger list that we have here, and then certainly also reflecting on some of the things that I've pulled out for as a separate item that kind of fit, at least within what I envisioned, into some of those board priorities. So taking a look at what we just talked about with the board priorities and thinking about these budget requests, the conversation we're going to have in our breakout rooms is with regards to which ones do you think closest aligned with our priorities, and which do you think should be considered as we continue to move forward? So it's really kind of your opportunity to give us some feedback on what we've pulled out and articulated, and also your opportunity to share with us what you think maybe some that you feel need to be moved forward that are important to you or you feel have a great impact across the district. So again, Rebecca, I think you can move us to our breakout rooms.
PowerPoint from the email that Randy sent in front of you, so you can reference if you need to the budget request. I believe it is screen 11 to 13 maybe. All right, are we ready to roll? Question number 1. Which budget requests align the closest to the school board's goals and priorities? Anybody want to start us off? Come on, Jeff.
I'll start where we left off, and that is, there's a handful of things on this list that are tied to student services, whether they're counselor positions, social worker positions, or things in that ilk. And we're trying to focus on improving our SEL. I think the more we can create the ability for our schools to be more flexible in how they are meeting kids' needs with those kinds of services, I think that would be good for us. And it's aligned to the goals that are in the priorities.
In addition to the student service staff, there is a lot of interventionists at all levels, both math and reading, that would also align to the priority number 1 in academics.
Thank you both. Anybody else have thoughts?
Do you mind if I ask a question, Annie? As when I was looking through a lot of these priorities and stuff, and as they were being drafted and things, one thing that kept hitting out on me was this concept of, do we keep a remote learning model going? And I'd be really curious as to what some of you have seen from either the student perspective, staff, admin, or wherever. Is there value in us doing that? Or should we go back to where we kind of outsourced our remote learning model to McFarland or to the state system? Is it going to take too much from us to do it? Or is it worth the investment? I can't think of a better year to ask the question.
I think if we do have a remote model, we have to be very clear that it's not going to be exactly the same as the classroom model. That, you know, if the kids get to have I don't know, some kind of parade or something, your remote student will not be able to do that activity. If there are certain science labs we're doing in science, your remote child will not do that activity. We've tried to keep it very equitable in that, and we end up cutting things from our regular classroom for the kids that are there, rather than, you know, having them, because we don't want the virtual kids to be left out. So we have to be clear that it's not the same thing.
I think 2 things. I agree with you, Amy. I think we are right now trying to create the virtual to be mirroring what we would do in classes. And that becomes challenging. In addition, like our youngers, to be on screen that long all day, to be live Zoom, that's a lot. So I think it needs to be clearly defined that we are going to address the same academic standards, the same social emotional learning standards. They will just be addressed in a different way. Students will still be meeting those standards, just not through the exact same way that our in-person students would be meeting them. That's my first thought. My second thought is, you asked about it financially. Financially, it depends the number of kids that really do it and the cost that comes in from those kids compared to the cost that it takes us to run these programs. And I can't answer that question. I don't know the answers to that.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that real quick. As a practitioner, concurrent with two different groups in two different places is really challenging, is not worth it. As Amy said, you end up cutting certain things because you don't want to leave one group out versus the other. As a science teacher, there's things that we do or have done in the past that we haven't done this year because of the remote aspect of it. It's not to say that it can't be done. It can. I think just most of us feel that it's better in person, hands-on. From the standpoint of it, is it worth it? Katie's is spot on. I think there is going to be an increased demand for it. I don't know how much. It's hard to forecast. I also think that there is probably enough expertise in this district to do it really well. I haven't heard a whole lot of great things about any, particular model like what McFarland does or anything like that. I think you could blend some things of asynchronous and synchronous to make it work really well and be very flexible. And I'm thinking specifically at the high school level, because that's what I deal with. And then if word gets out and you start pulling more kids in for that, you know what that means, right? I mean, we've always talked about that as far as enrollment goes up means more dollars coming into the district. So that's really what you kind of have to weigh out on it. Are there risks in going forward and attacking it? Yeah, there are. But I think there's opportunity there as well if you've got the right people in place to pull it off. So it's not a complete answer, but that's about as good as I can give you.
I just want to add a clarifying from mine. Oh, sorry. Just when I was speaking, I'm kind of speaking at an elementary level. I agree that congruent teaching of what our high school and middle schools are doing, that is super challenging. Our elementary teachers are either solely in person or solely virtual. And I think that's kind of how it has to be for a teacher to be able to do both and balance both. I don't think it's realistic, nor is it equitable, or we give our students full attention.
And just a quick follow on, as a high school teacher, I have no clue how you even do remote learning for elementary level kids. To me, it's just mind boggling. I wouldn't want my kid on the screen that long. And hats off to anybody who's tried to figure it out, because I don't even have the first clue.
It's amazing. I mean, Donna and Jody have been in the remote environment. They are doing some amazing things with the kids. But I think that's solely because they are teaching solely remote instead of doing both at the same time. So both of them could speak to that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I cannot imagine. I would just totally dislike the thought of teaching high school and having the kids have the screen off. Like every once in a while, I'll have a student that has to have their screen off just because of Wi-Fi and not having great Wi-Fi. And so if they keep their camera off, it helps them to be able to stay connected. But even having one student with their screen off, I think is, you're already not very connected. So then when their screen is off, it's, so hard. But, I do have to say, and I tell the kids every day how resilient they are, and how hard they're working, and it's not easy, and they didn't ask for this, and their parents made the decisions for them, and that they really are doing really great. They like to get on. One of the things that I think is hard is, like, during one of our breaks, I'll let the kids chat with each other. They can have their screen on and talk to each other, because, it's kind of like their recess and a chance to talk to their friends. But I have to admit, it's very scary what they might say. Like, I will not leave my screen because I'm afraid someone will share some inappropriate picture or say some inappropriate thing. And I think it's very scary, job security wise, to teach virtually, because you never know what you might say or a student might say, and a parent hears that and didn't hear the whole lead up to what you're doing. But that that's the most stressful part for me, teaching virtually.
Great question, Dave. Thank you all for your input. Anything else for that question? Otherwise, we'll move on to the second question here.
I just want to say I agree, and have the special ed lens that I am teaching both virtually and in person with kids, and just to have that stamina to stick with it. And special ed is just a different beast, and so some students, they need a lot of support. So it's just harder to be remote that way, but parent choice.
I think it was you, Katie, that said that. And I do think that needs to be reiterated to parents that, the remote is going to be different than the in-person. We can't make it the same thing. We can't do the same hands-on math things. Like today we did a volume thing. I can't ask the kids to go get I could provide containers at a cost and to go get something out of their cupboard to measure the volume. And, so that part's hard. And to really plan ahead for the pickup dates, I think is hard. I've hand delivered lots of stuff that, I decided I wanted to do, but I didn't want to wait till 2 weeks till the next pickup time. So, I know how much teachers already plan ahead. I mean, that's not anything new, but you really do have to be on top of things so you don't forget a kid. Or, I'm working with 3 different schools, and to make sure that, like last pickup, I sent something to Prairie and it was supposed to go to Heritage. And now, I'm going to have to go hand deliver it this weekend, which isn't a huge deal, but it's just one more thing to do when you're already busy.
I think it is a lot, the virtual part of it. It's not something we have done before, and it's not something that we are, we haven't done it for years and years, and other places have. And I feel like that, even being said, I mean, I'm a mom of a middle school and a high schooler in McFarland, and other parents who have their kids in that McFarland virtual one. I mean, there's a lot of complaints about that here, and they've been doing it for many years. So for us to try to dive in and do everything seems kind of overwhelming.
Thank you, Amy. All right, last question. I think we have probably about 3 minutes. Which budget requests should be considered as a high priority for the 2021-22 budget process?
One thing I did want to say when I was looking at the items, and maybe I missed it, but I know the science department put in a request for a science coordinator. We would love one at every elementary building. That's, pretty unrealistic, but I know that was put in to have an elementary science coordinator. I did not see that on the list. And I know a letter went to administration about that. Again, I don't know, maybe it was in January, February, I don't know. So I was just kind of curious why that did not make the cut. And I mean, granted, I love science, but even if I didn't love science, I mean, we're in a world that kids need more science than ever. And I feel like, that is really, really tough. And like I said before, it's hard to teach that kind of subject. At least for me, I've never taught science not hands-on. So it's really challenging to my brain to try to think of how you teach science not hands-on, because that's all I know. So I'm curious why that's
maybe I'm
not
wrong, but isn't there the math STEM specialists? Is that at the high school level? It was put in by curriculum instruction, so it wasn't put in by me.
I think that's separate, Katie. I don't think that's the same thing. We didn't put it in as math. We put it in as a science coordinator for the elementary buildings.
Got it.
I'll make note, Jody, and I'll check on that for you.
Okay. Thank you, Ann.
Yes.
And thank you, Katie.
I didn't know. I just saw that on the list, and I didn't put it in, so I didn't know where that
Well,
came from.
how would you know?
We have about 50 seconds left. So if anybody has any final thoughts for our small group.
I think just as mentioned before, social emotional health is kind of priority or key, and just overall just making sure basic needs are met first with students. So starting with that social emotional, working into academic and going from there. So just making sure, looking at the whole child, but taking care of their health and the first things first, I guess.
Yeah, I would agree with
Are there
that.
any specific areas where we're missing?
I'm sorry, Dave, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, did you see any specific areas or schools or grades where some of that is more missing than others?
One thing is our like non-English speaking students, like they really do not have the support they need. And even when we tried to get math books in Spanish, like we could get the online version, but we couldn't get the actual book. And it, they have so many struggles already. For us to make it harder for them to be successful, that is so difficult. We've had students, last year we had a student that spoke Mandarin. This year we have several that speak Spanish. And we just really, we're relying on Google Translate
I hate to
on an
interrupt,
iPad.
but I really need to cut you guys off, and I'm enjoying your conversation, but I have to be fair to the other groups.
Okay.
All right. Well, this actually comes right to the end of our workshop. What I wanted to do was really open it up if there are questions that came out of your breakouts that maybe you weren't able to, your facilitator maybe wasn't able to answer, or some things that you felt that I could fill in any of the blanks that might be there. But what we're doing tonight is taking notes on the conversations on each of our breakouts. We're going to drop those into a document that we can then share out so the board gets a sense of the general discussion and feedback that we're receiving in each of our breakouts. And then as the budget process moves forward, this at least gives us some context as far as decisions that we make. So what you see in the first draft of the budget, and then what may come in subsequent versions may be a result of some of the feedback and discussion we're having here tonight. So are there any questions or pieces that I can help to answer, or some members of our team can help answer? Any questions from our facilitators that want to bring forward? No questions?
Randy, I do have a question. This is more of the turning in the notes question to you. I had Tim Womarts graciously volunteer to take notes for Team Ely. That's what he called it. I didn't, he did it. And what I told my group is that if they wanted to think about this between now and over the weekend, we shared the link, the Team Ely link to them, that they could add their own thoughts, questions into that doc. If I don't give it to you until Monday, is that okay?
Absolutely fine. I think, and that's one of the things I told our group too, was if there's questions that come up that you think about as you process through this, absolutely feel free to let us know what that feedback is and those thoughts are. And we'll incorporate those in and move those on in front of the board so that they can see what those are. Yeah, there's a lot of information that's being shared here tonight. So I either feel I did a phenomenal job doing Steve's presentation, or I ultimately failed because there was no questions and I've completely confused you. So it's one of the two. I'm going to hope it's the former, not the latter, but no, absolutely. All seriousness. This is a process that there's a lot of information here. We wanted to really kind of put it all out in front of you so that you could see kind of what we're talking about and what we're discussing. And if there's pieces that you have questions about or further feedback as you reflect on it more, absolutely, we'd love to hear it.
So Randy, from an equity of voice standpoint, do you want us all to make a copy of the grid and share it out to our discussion group?
Yeah, why don't we, yes, I think we can certainly do that. I did not add mine into my link yet, so mine's all on paper. So, but absolutely, we can do that. Maybe Annie, you and I can kind of touch base and just make sure we do it in an efficient way here. So we all.
Just for reference, Tim, I didn't actually share the link of the grid. Tim Momart's created a Google Doc and took notes based on the questions that we had. And then I'm going to translate it. I'll move it into the grid on Monday.
Yeah.
I'm almost wondering, we don't want to open the main grid up, but could we maybe take the grid strip for our group and kind of toss it out? But that's maybe something that Annie and
why don't we just take that offline, and between us and Annie, we can figure out a way to get it pushed out to each of our groups. We have a list of all the folks there, and that'll give another opportunity for some concerted input. I think that'd be great.
It's a good idea, Kurt.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Any other questions? Excellent.
Yeah, I have a question now. Since we didn't come up with that idea, Randy, are we going to be at a disadvantage because Kurt came up with that and Tim Momart's came up with that?
We're already disadvantaged, Brian. You were in my group there.
We're already behind. All right,
we will get caught up. We'll get us all caught up. We'll be fine.
I think it helps Tim on his career path, Brian, but with Kurt retiring, I don't think Kurt really benefits from this brainstorm.
Yeah.
I think it does benefit me somehow. I just haven't figured it out yet.
All right. Well, I know that the board has their reorganization meeting coming up here. And I just, if there aren't any other questions, I just want to thank all of our staff for joining us here this evening. And again, if there's pieces that you want to provide us additional feedback on, we're wide open to hear that and want to hear from you in that respect. So thank you very much for your time. And what I'm going to do right now is we are going to, we'll exit the meeting here, or from our perspective, and the board members and I will move to the boardroom and we'll continue our meeting. So thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it.
recording. We are now unmuted.
Okay,
All right. Oh, Judy.
all right, then I'd like to initiate the selecting of board officers by asking for nominations for the office of president.
I nominate Joan.
Second.
I'm gonna nominate myself.
Okay, Jack,
Second.
I do not want to.
What's that?
I'm withdrawing as president and vice president.
I'll nominate Mark,
I'm sorry.
nominate you.
Oh.
You
I'll
okay with
second.
that or not?
I decline,
okay.
but thank you.
Any other nominations?
We have three.
Two. Mark declined.
Oh, sorry. I didn't-
Jack, Joan, and Jack. And
Right.
Joan.
I have paper in front of all of you. So if you could just write down, actually, you could write down president so that I know my papers and stuff, we know what they are. And we'll walk around.
I'll grab them and bring them over here.
Five for Joan, two for Jack. So Jack, or Joan is our president.
I just would like to thank everyone and right now I will try to do the job the best we can. And I want to thank David for the year. It was a tough year.
What? Nothing happened. It's been very quiet.
Uneventful.
Uneventful, but thank you for
Now I
that.
think, Joan, I think you can take over the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I would like to have nominations for the vice president. And motions.
Nominate Mark.
Second. Mark, and so, did you get that, Rebecca? Anyone else?
Nominate Jack.
I nominate Brian. I decline. Thank you, though.
So we have two. Any other nominations? So Mark and Jeff.
And again, please put VP or something on that. just in case something is different.
Jack. Mark. Jack. Jack. Mark.
Okay, so Mark is our vice president.
Congratulations. Continuing with the script in the order that we have on the handout, I would move to clerk next. I would entertain motions for clerk.
Judy?
Second, Any other nominations?
Nominate Ted.
Second.
So I believe we have two, Judy and Ted. And this is for clerk.
And again, put C or put full-time, please.
Judy. Judy. Ted. Judy. Judy.
So Judy is our clerk 4-3.
Congratulations, Judy. And lastly, we need a treasurer. So I would take any
Jack.
motion. I would second, Jeff. Second,
Joan, did you second that?
yes.
I'm thinking Joan.
So just the two, we have Jack and Kate for treasurer.
And again, please put C or full-time.
Yeah. Yeah. Dave. Dave. Dave.
Jack is our treasurer 4-3.
Congratulations, Jack.
Thank you for putting the fiscal responsibility.
Can we vote again? All right, thank you. There are a few other things that we have to do this evening, again, kind of following the script. We need to designate some official newspaper meeting, et cetera, and some memberships. So starting with the official newspaper where we post our notices and our minutes, and we have been using the Waunakee Tribune, and we just need to do a motion on this.
All we need is, these are all just the.
Do we want to do them all together or one at a
If
time?
there's no questions about any of them, you could do the newspaper, the times and dates, legal counsel and depositories all together.
Okay,
And WASB membership. If you want to do that, if there's no questions and you want to do them as a lot, you can make that motion.
okay,
Just a
so,
point of question.
Yep.
I'm assuming we are still posting the agendas at the town, which was Vienna and Westport,
And all the
all
municipalities.
municipalities.
I give it to all the municipality clerks, what they do with it. is their
Perfect, I mean,
business.
as long as I get.
Yeah, all of those, as far as the posting pieces, they go to all the municipalities as required by policy. The official newspaper is where we do our official like type A notices.
I move we accept all of the definitions.
second. Any questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So that took us through all of the, but not the setting of the annual meeting.
Now we'll do the setting of the meeting.
So the recommendation of the annual meeting is October 18th at 7 p.m. So unless anybody has a concern about that, I would take a motion.
Is that 18 or 19?
18, did I say 19?
The old one was 19. The new one.
If you read the last sentence, it says.
Okay.
Yeah.
So October 18th, 2021 at 7 p.m.
So I would need a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of that being our annual meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. And then we have a consideration of an administrative resignation.
Yeah, Katie Grundle's our assistant principal over at Prairie. We've been very blessed to have her for the last number of years, but she has accepted a position as a director of curriculum and instruction. Tim, that's in Jefferson. Jefferson. So I'm really happy for her. I know her husband works over in that part of the state as well. So it's a great move for her professionally. We'll miss her here certainly, but this is to release her from her contract so she can continue to, she'll be with us through the end of the school year. So this takes place the next school year.
Do we have to
Yeah,
vote on
we
that?
need to make an action on that we accept it.
Make a motion to accept the resignation as presented.
Okay. Oh, you can have it.
Nope, that's yours.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. I believe that this truck was inadvertently left out of our last meeting, so do you have anything
This
to add?
is, I just didn't have it properly noticed at the last meeting, so we wanted to bring it forth here. The dollar amounts are within, I think we have $51,000 is kind of the dollars that were set aside for it. There is a process to go through with the specific truck based on availability, so that'll be a piece that this gives us authority to move forward with purchasing the truck with those dollar amounts available to us.
Just point of clarification, this is not the truck that's on the list that we had tonight. On the 2 pages, there's a truck.
It actually
there
is,
too.
yes.
It is, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's dollars he reallocated in order to
Right.
pay for it, so yeah.
Make a motion to.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Update on the high school graduation.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment here while we're in a public meeting at the state. We are looking at planning graduation. It will be an outside event is what we're planning right now. Brian Borowski is looking at June 5th is our date. We're looking at a 6 p.m. Time period. If for any reason we have a rain issue on the 5th, then we would look at doing it on the 6th at 1 p.m. So obviously moving it outside gives us the opportunity to be able to have our graduates plus some family. So this is more just an announcement for the board. Keep that on your calendar because certainly you guys all play a big part of that. That's
And really the last thing on our meeting is future meetings.
Yeah, I have 2 things. One before I forget is we have next week, we have a budget meeting and a facilities meeting. I think we have them at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I'm wondering if I can move the facilities meeting to 6:30. When I saw Steve's agenda today for the budget, it's relatively long and I don't think he'll be able to get it done in just that hour. So for the facility folks, I just like to, as we post it, move it to 6:30 as opposed to 6 o'clock. That's fine. But we'll just make that adjustment tomorrow when we officially post it. And then the other question we had here was when we go back to our board retreat this winter, we talked about the board wanting to do a community parent listening session before the end of the school year. So we didn't really set a finalized date for that. So I wanted to bring it up here to see what that was still something that you would like to do. And if so, kind of a time frame of when you might want to do it. I think I would want to at least have something that we could advertise out for a week or so, or a couple of weeks, so people are aware of it. It'd be a piece we probably do as a Zoom meeting, a webinar type thing. It could be a couple different formats, but I work with Annie and we would help to orchestrate that.
It's helpful for your schedule.
It's, I think just trying to get a sense of a general time of when you'd like to do it, and week or a date or a week.
Week of the ninth,
What would you say, Mark?
sometime the week of the ninth.
May 9th?
May 9th? You mean,
Yeah,
So we have our regular board meeting on May 10th,
right. So that week, I'm saying there's
like Thursday or something.
Thursday or the next week would be fine too.
What would we accomplish out of the meeting?
I think what came out of the retreat that you discussed was the desire to, before we ended the school year, to have an opportunity to feedback from parents with regards to the end of the year. So that was the intent as we discussed it when was a retreat back in April.
Do you think we get better feedback? You know, we've been talking about, you know, having listening sessions maybe once every other month, you know, where we get more structured and maybe more planned out. I think that the parents are somewhat satisfied because their kids are back in school. Obviously, yeah, that is kids have probably lost ground. What are we going to do to bring them back to speed or support them? You know, I'm not sure what we would get out of it.
I think the feeling back in January was, I think, the piece of wanting to avail yourself to the community and the parents to have that last kind of conversation before we kind of adjourn for summer. That was the spirit of the discussion. I guess given where we're sitting now, what does the board think about
If
it?
we framed it sort of a opportunity to look back, look forward, if you have ideas, like to share about what has happened, or as you're looking forward, if you have ideas you feel are important for us to hear. You know, something like that might be worthwhile to give some input. And give sort of a closure to the year too, from, I think, their perspective.
Would we get more feedback by a survey? With that in mind, I like that idea of where we've been and we're moving forward and looking at, you know, kind of what they might like to bring forward out of where we've been. I don't know, Randy, what do you think you would? I know we had that one listening session, we had no one get on, and I know you've put a lot of time into preparing and, you know, I don't want to make you go through the act of that preparation with little or no feedback, and our surveys are pretty well responded to.
Surveys get responded to. You're right. The last community listening session, it was one person.
Amy.
It was my wife, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
she did a nice presentation.
She was very
yeah,
supportive.
we still did the presentation and we recorded it and we moved it forward. But I don't think that your intent, from what I remember from our retreat, was to do really a presentation piece. It was more of a listening piece. And I just thought, as we had it on our list to bring back to see if that's still something we want to do. There's definitely things we can get with kind of an end of the year survey, if that's a piece that you like, and we could kind of pull something together and bring it to one of our board meeting. And May's get pretty tight, but we could at least have a conversation of what you're generally looking for and send it out. That could be a piece then that comes back specifically to the board as feedback.
I think what parents are probably going to want to understand is what's going to happen next in fall, you know, as we open up. And you may get those type of questions that you're not ready to respond to. So, you know, if you're going to have this, then should we wait until June? Because we probably have better information from them.
What you could do with that in mind, if you wanted to do a piece that was like gather feedback at the end of the year, it potentially could be a survey. Do you do kind of something with parents as a kickoff to the school year and sometime in early August?
I don't know. You know me, I'd rather hear more often than less often from the public. I think this has been a very hard year, not just for us, not just for teachers, staff, students, and the families. I'd like to hear sooner while they remember than saying, well, let's put it off until a month before school, because if they have something that could help us, one, build a more positive relationship again, because we can't deny there's been some negative relationship stuff. And we need to get that back centered as much as getting kids back in the classroom. And if nobody shows up, then nobody shows up. And I think we do both, the survey and the listening session.
But maybe we wait until the year is over, like.
The only risk of waiting till the year is over is how many people leave, and
Yeah, but
they're not
maybe-
thinking about it. But at least do the survey, right at the end of the year.
But if you do it in June, all of your sports and extracurricular, the track season is gonna go, through middle of June?
Yeah, there's still.
To shoehorn this in without some type of preparation, and, go with what the heck we want to learn from it.
I guess I would prefer a survey now. I mean, listening to everybody, prefer a survey now with more open-ended questions, text boxes, not choose one. Because that doesn't really frame what people want to say. And then come back even later than June, but not August, something in July.
I mean, you probably want it towards the end of June, because, like I said, all the programs are.
If we want it for direction for next year, I think you're right, Jeff. We need to do it sooner. It depends what information we want. And I think it's the directive.
Well, and if you do the tidbit on the survey, there will be more listening session in early summer as a follow-up to the survey.
Correct.
You might plant a seed that they want, okay, this is something to forward to. I just think it needs to be a fairly, like Brian said, sort of open-ended questions that doesn't take a lot of work to put together, because we don't want to shape their thinking, we want to hear their thinking.
Right.
Why don't I do this? Why don't I pull together at least some concepts of what these questions could be, and I'll try to bring those at May's meeting. So at least you have we're gonna have to get that going, and I'd like to see your feedback on questions. So for the meeting coming up here in a couple of weeks, we'll at least have a draft of what some of the questions could be to get your feedback, and we'll go from there.
I hope everybody has submitted their committee choices. And maybe Mark and I can get together and make up those committees, and we will have those ready for. We are ready.
But we have the budget committee coming up, so do we want the old
No.
committee yet, or? the
No,
new one?
those new committees won't start until our May 10th meeting.
Okay, so the old budget facilities.
So there is one facility member no longer with us. If anybody wants to volunteer to go to the facility. Is the third person here.
When is that?
It's
Right after budget.
I know that.
It's at 6:30. Which day is that, Rebecca?
May 3rd?
It's Monday the 3rd at 6:30.
Yeah. I'll send you that calendar tomorrow.
Thanks.
And I'd like to welcome Ted
Yes.
to your first official meeting.
Here. Now, is this where he's sitting?
No, this is just
right
for
now.
tonight.
Okay, that's- Yeah, I got used to Gary there, so this would be a nice new location for board.
If we ever can be closer, maybe. but-
All right, anything
One
else,
of the things-
maybe?
That's all I need.
Okay.
Just a comment, one of the things I asked Randy to do for the facilities committee is look at humidity in our buildings, and helping maintain better humidity. Because one, it's probably a one-time cost, as we talked about, but from a health standpoint, viruses and things like that flow more slowly through a more humid environment than rain. And if you think about January, February, when our heat set in, our buildings get very dry. So it really could be a potential thing to improve the health of our buildings, the health of our people, our students, and maybe reduce absenteeism.
I know that John is looking into it, so.
Thank you, Jeff. So I would take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Members should get it.
What?
I think those members should get this first.
Oh, yes.
Motion.
Ken, you're on.
I'm on what?
Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I'll vote yes.